I would say there are, let's say, three areas where you can work on. It's like the legal guardrails, and it's technology to make things much more efficient and better. But then you need an inspiring vision of the future that's worth living.
Welcome to The Regeneration Will Be Funded. This is a show about regenerative finance, exploring pathways to a life-affirming economy. I'm your host, Matthew Monahan. Today's guests are Alexander Watson and Mange Kumarasamy. Alex is the co-founder and CEO of Explorer.land, which is a part of OpenForests, and Mange looks after strategic partnerships. Thank you guys for being on the show with us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Great to be here, yeah.
And so I wanted to start with you, Alex. You've been a part of this project from the jump, co-founded it back in 2011, I understand. Can you tell us the history of Explorer.land and OpenForests?
Yeah, so I will really start at the beginning, how I run into my first co-founder on the way towards the pub. He was putting some instruments into the car, and I just passed by and said, okay, do you need a bass? Looked a little bit weird at me and said, yes. So I got back home, got my bass, and we went to a jam session and become really good friends. So through music. So after studying forestry, I started a super cool job in Panama. So where I established cocoa agroforestry systems and converted teak plantations into mixed forest plantations. And was super excited there doing this job. And after a while, I, however, found out that just good intention is not enough. So in some cases, the farmers sold their properties to the German Forest Investment Fund, and we did some nice work there, but then they get a little bit further and cut some more forest to sell it to the Germans. So at the end, basically, it led to a negative impact. Reforestation has led to a negative impact, and we wanted to change that. And therefore, we founded in 2011 a company bringing more transparency into the sector with data. So we know how to do a forest inventory. We brought in drones to have high resolution orthophoto mosaics and 3D models, combined that with on-the-ground measurements, build geospatial databases. And that was a really exciting story. So we traveled from Southeast Asia through entire Latin America and supported projects on their way. And the data is really good to better understand how a project works, so they can improve the work. They know early when something is going wrong and they can improve it. So it's a kind of self-reflection process. And then we had like a few clients which also used this internal data, basically recycle that into a very consistent communication with their clients, with their funders, stakeholders, and the public.
Right.
And we were observing this quite closely because we built these tools for them. And we really observed like that this could be a game changer. Because if you as a funder in Europe, North America, you're usually a little bit unsure to spend money in Panama, Colombia, Peru, or wherever in the world, because you cannot control where the money is going to.
Right.
But if you give the money to someone and they can show you on a satellite map with data that after 3 years there are trees growing, they put camera traps into the forest where you can see the jaguar passing by. You see people working there constantly, planting these trees, getting an income. This is super powerful, and at the same time, it's quite simple to do. You just need a map. You can tell the story on top of a map, and then you can simply ground truth these story points in data. And this is I think the best medium to connect this an inspiring storytelling that brings new people in but at the same time connect to data and to build the trust and confidence in such projects. And this is what it really needs. So we need more confidence, more trust to unleash more capital from the private sector for the restoration space.
Mm. Well said. I have so many things I can't wait to dive in around the platform and that vision. Very well articulated and touches on so many themes we've been exploring in our conversations. Mange, what made you join Explorer.land and why are you working with this project?
Yeah, cool. I mean, I worked in the corporate space for 20 plus years, working in technology and sales, and I ended up closing one of the biggest deals in the history of the company, and that was a moment that I realized what I do had no impact on society and this world. Being a father of three children, I said the only way I'm going to do this is if I leave. So I left my entire career. I
Mm.
took on some training, learned about climate change, and really gotten in deep into getting involved in climate. And then one day, like this is well into my journey, working with startups and trying different things. I saw this webinar by Alexander and WeForest talking about corporate greenwashing. And when I saw this, I'm like, this is so cool. This is like what I want to be. So I immediately um, used Gen AI to create me a message that will get Alexander's attention. And I fine tuned it and I sent it off to him. And it was shocking. He said, let's talk.
It worked out.
And then he gave me a time, and it was like 6 a.m. my time. I'm like, you know what? It's okay. So I got on this call. It's a half an hour call. I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do? I did what I do best. I'm like, let's just connect with this person, right?
Mhm.
Let's not pitch anything. Let's not ask for anything. Let's connect with this man. We ended up talking for over 2 hours,
Mm.
and yeah, here we are. Honestly,
What year was that?
that was about 6 months ago.
Oh,
That was
great.
about six
So you're
months
still
ago.
new to the project. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, I felt like I found my home, right? Because I went through all this. Like, how people working in environment side of things, they say there's names like tree hugger. Okay, my barber calls me a tree hugger when I go there time to time for a haircut, and but it's like it's funny how this whole space is. I've gone through, like, I got excited about CDR. I got excited about
Mm.
like all of these different things around climate, but then at the end, I realized where I'm in Canada. We have so much of the forest. I believe like 9% of the world's forest is in Canada.
Mhm.
And I've learned by working with Open Forest, with people that we associated with, that there's a lot of bad things that are happening within these forests and within these governments. So to me, finding a way to channel some of that global north money into the
Mhm.
global south, where a lot of this like a protection is needed. I thought this is what we need to do. So
Mhm.
and when we saw Climate Week New York, I said to Alex, I'm like, dude, we need to go here and we need to get the word across, because we need to bring America and Canada and South America, who's going to be like very present here, into this picture, right?
Mm.
So yeah.
Nice. Well, I commend you for the courage to make that shift from kind of the comfortable corporate work that sounds like you were excelling in, and I think we need millions of people to do that shift right now and to say all hands on deck for the climate, nature, biodiversity crisis that we find ourselves in, and how do we connect our skills and our aptitude and our energy to things that are going to be important for all of life and future generations. So Explorer.land, can you help us understand at a high level where are we at today? How many projects are using the system? How do you kind of frame and think about the size and scale of the work so far?
Well, so Explorer is reaching 2,000 projects this year. So
Right.
from a let's say, broad type of projects. So starting from marine ecosystems, kelp forest, mangroves, coastal mangrove restoration projects, agroforestry, conservation projects, carbon projects, sustainable agriculture. So everything that's nature-based related can show what they do on the platform. In a nutshell, what is Explorer? It's for people who haven't seen it. So I describe it as a combination of Instagram and a Google Maps, but where you always have data to dive deeper. So
got it. So because there's so much data, it sounds like you're not just saying, oh, this is what percentage of the forest has canopy cover, or that this is this type of land use type. I mean, there's so many different ways to slice information, and obviously across different land use and ecosystems. And you mentioned the word story, so obviously there's also a temporal aspect to this. Yeah. How do you think about the combination of those things?
I think to get the full picture of a forest, it's a super complex ecosystem. It has a lot of different components, from the plants, the animals, people working there, hydrology, and all these things. And you need different, either, let's say, stories or data points to get the full picture. And on Explorer, you can place geolocated news posts with photos or videos, or where you can integrate charts of certain information. So we connect with other tools like bioacoustics, so that you can read out, let's say, the animal species just by the acoustics for a certain place. So that's like the storytelling component. Then you can visually document the impact through monthly satellite images that you can see. We started 3 years ago. There was like a green field, and now we could connect some ecological corridors in a quite intense agricultural area. We put a camera trap there. We could see that the ocelot is going through these corridors. This is the visual component. And then you can add still the data on top of it. So it's like a pyramid. So I think on the surface, we are focusing on telling the story, having it visual, so getting through the heart, and then slowly working our way towards the head with dozens of data layers, which are different for each project. So for the one for conservation project, you want to make sure that there's no forest loss. So therefore, we connect to APIs from the Global Forest Watch and retrieve the data. In other case, they have problems with fire, so we link to the NASA fire alerting system. And so for each project type, we try to compile the right, or the project can select the right data sets from the library which are there. We're connecting all open source or data with free licenses. And if that's still not enough, we can then still integrate some proprietary, let's say, super accurate carbon measurement maps from Planet or
it's adaptable.
It's adaptable.
It's adaptable to anything, right? Like, and that's I think that's what's really cool about Explorer.land. It's almost like taking like a Lego block approach, right? So whatever you want to put in, it's there, right? Whatever type of data. We by default, we promote the use of public data,
right?
Whether it's thematic layers that we work with different universities around the world that are applying thematic layers, we promote that because that's what we want. We don't want to be taking the siloed approach. We want to create this like symbiosis, like where everything is connected and everyone's kind of helping each other, right?
Right.
And,
so for a proprietary data layer, do I, as a land project, go out and source that and then upload it to my profile, and your standards are supporting that? Or are you linking me to those types of opportunities and I can then, put my coins in to get that access, or both?
Both.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. How do you think about the because obviously the backdrop here is we have this explosion in MRV, measuring, reporting, verification technologies. We have all this new data that's coming from satellites and from drones and from soil sensors and testing and bioacoustics to environmental DNA. I mean, like this ecosystem is maturing at a dizzying, pace, and more information to construct essentially this Earth twin, this digital twin of our biosphere and environment. But a lot of that requires capital, right? Like when we run a soil test on the farm I live on, like we have to pay the soil testing company because that costs them money to do that analysis in the lab and to pay for their team. And so how do you think about that tension between, well, we want everything to be free and open source and completely publicly available, and it costs money to get rich, good information?
Yeah. Basically, I have two answers
Please.
for this. First of all, I think we have to find a sweet spot between the costs for monitoring, because it always conflicts with money that could go actually in restoration. So
Right.
therefore, we have to really find a sweet spot. Therefore, what I always recommend is to go high level first, see what's data there, and then just drill down as deep as you can. But in terms of the restoration itself, I don't think we have a bottleneck in data or applications. So we have a bottleneck in governmental legislation that create a framework so that these projects can work. So let's have a look at the carbon market. For example, it's like organic, no? So it's between 5 and 15% around the globe, because you can eat organic food or you can leave it. The same is with carbon credits. So Microsoft is currently buying 60-70% of the entire voluntary carbon market. So
Right.
there is basically no market.
Right.
It's just a big marketing campaign. So the state has to put legislation in place that companies who pollute have to pay a carbon tax.
Right.
And then it's relatively simple to develop projects. So if you get money, you need decent factors, carbon sequestration factors, a few sample plots, but then and a good implementation organization on the ground, which should get the majority of the money. So that's the
Yeah. So you're saying the legislation is the bottleneck. I think it's a really important, explicit insight. And it seems like you're implying that bottleneck is tied to an underfunding of the actual restoration work. Like we don't have enough restoration work. They're not getting enough funds. There is no real carbon markets. It's mostly just Microsoft distorting everything and a very small voluntary market relative to the size of the problem. Is that?
Yeah. So I think we cannot get above a certain threshold. So we can improve the processes, of course. No? So we can make it more efficient. We can have better transactional systems, maybe efficient, more accurate carbon measurements. But that will not remedy the missing funding gap.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, we know that we don't know how the markets will develop, but do you sense that it will be kind of a rapid scaling up of carbon markets, or do you think we're in this kind of shift where now everyone's talking about nature and biodiversity and carbon markets being problematic? And like, do you think that things are going to broaden and widen out before we scale up? Or any comments on that?
To be honest, I really don't know it. I hope that like the political leaders see that's really severe, and we don't have a lot of time, and we get really the legislation railguards in place so that the economy is forced to do the right thing. So, and I think the economy, so the private sector, would be happy if they have very clear guidelines on what they have to do, because that will also make the market more fair. So you're not, let's say, voluntary or not doing nothing. So everyone has to do the same. It will be a fair market, and then certainly it will channel the needed money into the system. I just heard one interesting number yesterday. It costs, I don't know if it's right, but someone told me, he has a PhD in it. It costs like 12 cents per person per day to solve the climate crisis. So It's from Rob Delayed. No, but I found it interesting. So there's we have the possibilities at hand. So the funding is relatively small, but we just need a system in place that forces the funding going to the right place, because the capitalistic system on its own is not doing it.
Yeah, and the system is destroying so much habitat that even if we have a lot of new capital coming in for, let's say, tree planting and restoration efforts, we still need to stop the hemorrhaging of the amount of deforestation, for example, that we're doing. How do you think about Explorer.land in the context of preserving what we have, conservation? What tools are made available for projects in that context?
Conservation. I mean, one of the things that we were looking at in Canada, for instance, we work with an NGO that's looking to protect and stop the destruction of some of the forest in Canada, and so their NGOs, they're not well funded, and the governments. Let's just be real. It's Canada. What is our natural resources? It's the trees and oil, right? So it's going to be very hard for a country like Canada to stop cutting down their trees and stop bringing out oil, right? But I find regulations, like I really admire the EUDR, because that is something that hopefully will replicate and go around, and it's really pushing other organizations and other nations to take a serious look at the way they do things, and protecting their land, and because EUDR is making sure that there's no degradation is taking place. So it's not just deforestation; it's actually looking at degradation. So if you're degrading the land, then how are you gonna? If you're a coffee importer, how are you gonna get your coffee beans to Europe? Right? There's a massive market in coffee, and we're all addicted to coffee. Europeans maybe a little bit more, maybe, right? It's just how are you going to get that over? So it's putting tremendous pressure, and I think technology will aid in solving this as well. Like I really love the new data set. I forget what it's called, but it's in partnership with Meta, WRI, and Bezos, where we're getting like 1 meter tree height resolution data, right? So that is groundbreaking, because now what happens to a nation like Canada, where they were using 30-meter resolution data, and so like with working with that nonprofit, what I learned is they're called Wildlands League. I really admired like the woman that was working there, Jan Sumner, who's been in this industry for so long, and she showed me that there's so many scars being created from cutting down trees, and that's not showing on these 30-meter resolution maps. So now when we bring in like a data set like what the new data set is like, guess what? It's going to start showing. So and then UDR, like regulations, and I think Forest Act is being taken by like California and I believe Illinois, Colorado, and another state. So New York, I believe. So now what's going to happen, right? Like it's gonna change the game, and I think we're going to start looking at that degradation piece instead of just only looking at deforestation, right? So
So EUDR, of course, being the European Union deforestation regulation. We've heard it mentioned several times here at Climate Week, so it's clearly in the zeitgeist, if you will. And it sounds like we're kind of saying that regulations and guardrails is going to be really important for kind of creating some parameters and some limits to our activity, and markets and technology and tooling will help to kind of make things more efficient and precise and enable the activities within those guardrails, and hopefully also this type of work that you're doing, or these types of data sets, can help to inform those policymakers about the types of regulations. Yeah, please.
Well, I would say there are, let's say, 3 areas where you can work on. It's like the legal guardrails, and it's technology to make things much more efficient and better. but then you need a vision, an inspiring vision of the future that's worth living. And all this together, all this has to work very closely together to really make the shift, the necessary shift, I guess. So these three components.
And what is your inspiring vision for making this all work?
Well, so what we try with Explorer.land is to show all these inspiring projects, no? Because if you look at news, it's all about dooms. No? It's
Right.
fire, it's hurricanes, it's flooding. No? But there's so many great projects out there which can have an impact. No? So where they build water retention in some landscapes, like Just Dig It, where they transform entire landscapes into green belts again and keep the water there. So there's a lot of inspiring possibilities, and I think that's what we need to bring to the surface and then get more people engaged and roll it out.
I was going to say, it's like, the multi-stakeholder engagement. That's crucial to this whole topic, right? Like, we're promoting for those stakeholders to share positive stories, right? So Explorer.land is not trying to showcase, okay, this is where deforestation is taking place, all the negativity. No, we're trying to encourage, like, hey, look, this is all the positive things that are happening.
Right.
So those the umbrella organizations, like, or the alliances, can share that among those like partner network that they're working with, saying, hey, look, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here, and they're all interconnected, so anyone can see what anyone else is doing, right? As long as everyone's willing to share it, right? But if they don't want to share, of course, then we have the ability to hide it, right? But it's I think focusing on being more optimistic, right? Otherwise, like, to Alexander's point, it's going to be like all you hear on media, like on the news, is like doomsday, right?
Sure.
It's like, so then as a person, you feel like, okay, why am I even gonna even try, right? Like, we need to get everyone to be talking positively and be optimistic that our future could be good, right?
So how do you drive adoption for Explorer.land? I think about the farm I live on. It's pretty easy to get people to share Instagram photos and to, like, kind of pop something in the feed about, oh, cool, look at the tree we just planted. And it's pretty easy to get, a pin added to Google Maps and say, here's our open hours for the farm shop. But like, to adopt a whole new platform is tricky, right? Like, how do you do it?
It's really, I would say, the central. There's a central paradigm shift in how to communicate. So the simple and old way to communicate is in a linear story. So with a PDF, a newsletter,
right,
like a blog roll, something like that. And communicating with Explorer requires, on the one hand, the technical side. So you have to upload your geolocations. So it's usually done by technical people, by GIS people.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have to capture the stories in the field. So you need to have some people in the field that getting the stories uploaded.
Yeah.
And then you need someone in the communication space that's able to embrace this new way of communication, because you're not telling the story about the project. The story is telling the story. The project is telling the story. So, and it's a challenge. So to establish this new paradigm to communicate in space and time, because communication people and technical people have to work closely together. Of course, we try to design Explorer as simple as possible,
right,
so that also non-GIS people can tap in this.
Right. So just kind of draw the map.
Exactly,
right.
Draw the map, and then it's just like a news post on Instagram, but geolocated. And what we try to do is, because it's not a social media platform, it's a communication tool. But then if you build up your regular stories on Instagram or LinkedIn, you can link towards the consistent and bigger story. So you have one camera trap of a tiger in Indonesia in an agroforestry system, and then you get drawn into the project, and then you can explore that the tiger could only appear here because 5 years before the farmers have established agroforestry, set aside some protection areas and things like that.
Right.
So that's how we try to bring in from the big social media platforms people towards closer to the project, get inspired, dive deeper, get connected, support them, go there, help them, or fund them. So,
Right. And fund them. That was my other question, because it does seem like what you mentioned, that projects are using Explorer.land to make themselves more legible and attractive to funders. That's
Yes.
obviously a use case people will put effort into. Okay, well, I'll go draw my coordinates and put all this data in if it means I'm going to get more capital. What are you finding are the key components that are useful to your core, I guess, customer, the land projects, that they need to help them with fundraising?
Well, so if you a project developer, you're usually very deeply into project development and not in communication. So at some point, you need to create like a PowerPoint presentation and do your roadshow and get funding for it. And there's a saying, dead by PowerPoint.
Yeah, totally.
And if you can call up your project during a call or in a personal meeting in 3D and do like a farm tour and show that's your track record, this is what we have achieved, this is over there, the new forestation area will be there. Are you interested jointly to build this up? This is what we get as a feedback from our clients, that this is really what excels. So that they can really show the project as if going there in the first stage. And then, of course, if someone has invested, it's quite easy to do updates. So usually you get like once in a year a PDF report and some information material. But if they do the documentation on the go, you always get updates and you get drawn in again into the project. And you become more connected to the project. And then, of course, it's also much more likely that you get more financial backing in the future from these investors or funders.
Yeah.
And these projects, right? Like it's just the entire industry collaborating together. That's how the funding will start generating. Because it's like a conversation that I had with a certification body, right? Where I mentioned to them the fact that if you're certifying a certain product, right, to be good,
right,
then all of a sudden we see it all the time where that certification body is called out for something that they're doing bad, right? So it's because the certification body is just using an image, a seal, to say, okay, it's certified, right? But then if you look deep dive into the certification bodies, like where's your primary source of revenue, right? It's through certification.
Right.
So, and then you have multiple seals, right? Then what happens? You're creating a competition, right? If yours one, you're okay. You can be using the best system to certify. But then when you have competition, it's just natural. They start bending the rules a little bit, right? So what I was thinking is like, what if these certification bodies are able to actually show what they're doing instead of a seal? Let's look at it as a QR code. If you're 100% sure that it's good, then you're avoiding risk for your potential like legal risks in the future. That's A, right? And now you're being really transparent. And these projects, if they're working with these certification bodies to promote and do this with the QR code, bringing it into their site, that could create a new revenue stream for them, because their projects are a lot more transparent, right? And then for consumers, it's going to provide a lot more confidence. As a consumer, if I'm buying a milk, and then I can scan something and I can see where my milk, because it doesn't have to get into like crazy detailed.
It doesn't have to be the exact cow, but it'd be nice to know the farm, nice. Maybe information about the farmer.
That's right? Like it's a start, right? It's a start. It could get into other details, but you don't have to. It's just, it builds so much more trust in your brand by providing traceability, right?
Right. So I'm buying that milk. I look at the carton and it says 100% organic. And as a savvy consumer, I'm immediately skeptical of all claims being made to me by corporations. And, yes, that's a good start. But what if it was a QR code, I scan it with my phone, and then boom, the actual farm on Explorer.land with the farmer story, and everything can be I can double click into more data, more understanding of what's happening in either that supply chain even, or what's happening on the ground, or what happened 5 years ago. And well, it turns out that used to be forest and now it's all pasture land. I don't know if I feel so good about that now. And so the technology is disintermediating all of these additional layers that we had before, and the digitization, the ephemeralization, the instantaneous software eating the world of what is possible here. But to bring us in closer relationship with our supply chains, our products that we buy on an everyday basis.
Yeah, this is how you can like open up the financing strategy, right? Like it's there's so much that these project developers can do to enable that. Like it has to work hand in hand. Like regulation, like EUDR. That's again, I'm going to reference EUDR because EUDR is asking you to map out your supply chain to polygon level of where it's coming from, right?
So to ensure there's no deforestation.
That's right. But then if you were getting some coffee beans, right, where some coffee beans could be coming from one polygon that's could be involved in deforestation or degradation. Another coffee bean is coming from it, and then that's packaged together. So how do you provide that kind of traceability? That
tricky.
becomes very challenging. Or MDF, right?
What's that stand for?
The MDF wood, like a IKEA, like furniture.
Okay.
So where all that wood chips coming from? Like it's so there are challenges, right?
Sure.
But I think having those regulations in place, it's gonna work well. And then the project owners of, I think they have the ability to like push this out and saying, hey, look, they want to be good, like and not get themselves involved, because it's not just EUDR or there's, from an emissions perspective, you're going to have to map out like your scope 3 emissions, which is mapping out your entire supply chain, right? So I think there's an opportunity for those organizations to promote that as a brand endorsement, right? Because at the end of the day, the milk company will sell more milk to the consumer if the consumer has more trust and they're willing to pay more for that product, right? If it's traceable. So I think the opportunity exists for those projects themselves to say, hey, look, the owners of those cows and that on to maybe get their projects on a platform like Explorer.land and maybe providing them that traceability information at a cost, right?
Yep.
So
as of the funny thing is we really get disconnected from nature
Totally.
through social media, through the digital world. And now we're trying to reconnect the people, pulling them slowly back again through digital technology to build real connection, because you will protect where you feel connected to. And this is what is all about. So if we can reconnect the society with the nature, with the projects, with their own products they're eating every day, so then it's also much more likely that there's more engagement to protect them. So you care for your family, but you don't care someone else in Latin America picking your coffee. So, and this has to be changed. So, and I think to some extent we can do that with digital technology.
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a paradox, but it is rooted in the context of 8 billion of us on this planet in a global economy. So how do you pay for all of this? Like, what's your business model? How do you make that work?
Yeah, it's quite simple. So we have a SaaS model, we have a free plan, and then if you use the features quite extensively, you start paying. That's the one side, and on the other side, there's a possibility for brands or corporates to get branded maps, and they also have to pay, but of course more.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we try to shift the costs away from the projects toward the brands,
Right.
because we want the projects using the money to plant trees,
Mm.
and we want the corporates paying for their brand endorsement.
Got it. And why do corporates choose for a branded map? They're using that to then showcase the efforts of the projects they're supporting, or it's maybe their own farms, or what are those use cases?
I think what we could say transparency is one of the key items, and then of course regulations, right, are gonna
Gotcha.
that it's gonna force. It's a matter of time, right? It's a
Mhm.
matter of time where everyone will have to be showing where things are coming from, what's happening within their supply chains, whether
Mhm.
it's scope 3 or traceability, right? So, and we also believe that, like, when you look at the global south, we at Explorer.land doesn't have like a price structure saying, okay, this is what we charge for a project,
Mhm.
because it's hard. Like, if you're a country like Sri Lanka, for example, where I'm originally from, and they don't have a lot of money, right? With like some of these project developers, how are they going to pay? Like, let's say, for instance, they'll just take €100 a month or something for providing this. That's a lot of money, right?
Mhm.
It's it's like 400 times more, right, in their
Right.
currency value. So we try to provide something that everyone can afford.
Mm.
So it's just looking at, like that, addressing the inequality issues, right? So,
Yeah.
and then there's some projects that are like that we think that are super important for the world to know, and at any moment we say, you know what,
Mm.
go put your project for free, because it is what it is, right?
Mhm.
And then of course the corporations, I think, building that brand value, and we've seen it with like big brands that we are already working with. They want to do this,
Mhm.
right? They want to show all this. So I think there's
Mhm.
good market for this.
Could you recall the question? So I'm just
Yeah, the motivations of the
Mhm.
corporates of the branded maps. Curious, like, what those use cases are. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course there are different use cases, but actually big brands also recognize that they have to be more sustainable.
Mhm.
And for example, in the case of Yves Saint Laurent, um, yeah, they have a program, Refill to Rewild. So they're shifting their cosmetics line towards
Mm.
circular towards a circular approach, and for them it's super important to be recognized as a sustainable
Right.
a more sustainable organization, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So I know you've given a lot of thought to the architecture of this platform, and obviously it must have gone through many iterations in the 12, 13 years since you started. Um, it's a bit maybe of a wonky question for some, but I'm curious, and as simple as we can make it, like, what is the fundamental architecture and data taxonomy of how Explorer.land is built?
Yeah. Our goal is to make it so simple as possible, and so that many organizations can use it. And I can give you one example that makes it very clear.
Mm.
So you have projects, they consist of many locations, and many projects could be aggregated with one organization. But then you might have other organizations that, for example, also engage with these projects. So maybe it's not so simply explained, but what we try to create is like an end-to-end relation model, so that organizations can be connected.
Yeah, no. So I guess what I hear is, like, there's a garden or an acre
Yeah.
of farm, and that's at one level, and then, but maybe there's a farm that manages 5 or 6 different plots,
Yeah.
and then maybe there's an aggregation of many farms into a bioregional conservation regen ag kind of
Yeah.
group. Maybe there's a nation state kind of aggregation of bioregions, or
It's like
Yeah.
a web, right? Like, it's the way it's designed, right? Like you have everything, and it's completely just connected. It's like literally, I look at it as like it's almost like the internet, right? Where um, you have a certain piece of land, and you draw a polygon to show where that land is.
Mm.
So who's working on that land? So that's going to be like an ecological group, right? That's protecting that land. And so they can claim to protecting that land. And then you have, let's say, a corporation that's sponsoring it, right? So they can claim to protect that land, but it's traceable. So they can't, like, you can't have multiple organizations stating that they're,
Mm-hmm.
Doing certain
Right.
afforestation or anything like that, because
Because the integrity helps to reduce double counting.
that's right. It
Right.
shows statistically, right? Like, so if you're lying, it would show, because that is connected. And then it's just a hierarchy, is like, now you have the corporation, and then you can have, let's say, a certification body that's tied to this, right? And we've already have, like, I think, a partnership with one of the large certification bodies, where you can tap in. Now you can go into the certification body and find, hey, this certification body is working with all of these organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can just hop from one to another, and you can do this in a map, and that is what's cool. Or you can do it
Mm-hmm.
on the side of the map, where you can go from company to organization,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can get into a country level. So if you're, Panama, for example, now there's multiple organizations, multiple projects that are going on, but you are, as a Panamanian government, you want to understand what is happening within your country. You could look at that at a hierarchy level and deep dive into all of those components. So that's why I mentioned about, like, it's like scalability and the adaptability of the platform.
Right.
It's endless. We can expand to forests, to oceans, space. It doesn't really matter. We don't have any ways of restricting for future expansions, and it all flows through within the platform.
Yes. So maybe to put it very simple, how the structure is built up, it has a clear asset hierarchy. So you have location, project, organization, and this then enables us to link it to different other systems. So, for example, we have an API to Salesforce. So, meaning if an organization is tracking their invoicing and donations on Salesforce, they then can reflect this information directly through their organizations, through projects, to the sites. So you know, if someone has invested 1 million, Nike invested 1 million, then you see how this money is distributing over the organizations, projects, sites, and how much money, how much trees, how much carbon credit. So really providing a breakdown. So.
And are these APIs, I mean, this is what I was going to ask you next about. What about interoperability across other types of applications that might be showing land projects? Or, you guys were really early to this space and, one of the leaders, but there are other efforts afoot to showcase projects on maps and marketplaces and, different iterations of things now on blockchain as well. So how do we create interoperability so that the land projects ultimately don't have to keep reinserting their information into every place?
Well, so the application has a documented API. So with that, it could basically connect to all kind of systems. That's what we already done. So I think in the beginning you mentioned the Forest Forward program of WWF, which is their flagship corporate engagement program, where they map IKEA, HP towards their engagement in the landscape. And they have like a very distinct monitoring database where they have milestones that can be achieved. And all this information is then mapped towards Explorer simply with an API. It's not rocket science. It's super simple.
Right.
Maybe a standardization of the APIs would help. So to make it even easier to connect with other applications.
That's if other entities want to store their information in Explorer.land, then they simply map that to your data API taxonomy. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so we have different ways to interact with Explorer. So one thing is that we just display data from outside in dashboards or stream them into the Explorer. So you will see it there, but the data is stored on the other database. Or we create a module inside of Explorer, which then can host certain information.
Got it. Cool.
I think your question around. I think it's a really cool question that you're asking there, because it's you have Explorer.land, you have other organizations, like the one you had an interview this morning.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, there's Restore.eco,
yeah.
there's the One Earth Marketplace.
That's
There's, I'm
Multiple.
kind of seeing multiple projects get stood up right now in the Web3 blockchain space, and we're kind of experimenting. We even did a grants round for land projects. We had 24 land projects, so not a large number.
Yeah.
And we had an ingest data stage of, okay, you're applying, where are you based, who are the people associated with the project, history of the project, and so forth. And yeah, it's this feeling of like, well, certainly I don't want to keep asking you when you're applying for funding, for example, to just keep repeating the same information over and over and over. And if we want to express anything in our application to showcase and mirror back or to track impact, it seems pretty obvious that we need to kind of have open shared standards,
100%.
right?
Certainly.
100%.
Yeah. So no one will build the monolith that can do everything.
Of course.
So it has to, all the components need to be enabled to communicate in an efficient and effective way,
right,
with each other.
So it's basically a value on interoperability and on openness.
And I think it's also a nice picture because we're dealing with a super complex ecosystem,
right,
with different cores which are quite resilient in itself,
right.
And in order to, let's say, display or create the twin, you need an even complex system,
right.
And for this, let's say, the APIs are like the nervous streams to connect these components.
Right. Yeah. There's that comic, whatever, where it's like, what's going on? There's 25 different standards. We got to create a new one. Now there's 26 standards. It's like,
Like our approach has always been like where like we are always open to. We don't own the data, right? So if whoever wants to share the data with someone else, go for it, right? We provide that exposure and the ability to like interchange that data. I guess otherwise, why would an organization have like 500 projects on Explorer.land, but then there's some other capabilities with let's say Restore, and then you're gonna upload 500 projects in Restore and replicate this entire process.
Right.
It's just it doesn't make any sense.
Totally.
Right? So we're always open to saying, hey, look, let's exchange the data, share the data, make it easy for these projects to get on the ground, right? Like and like even like I was having this conversation with Alexander where when we were at the leaders reception at Climate Week, we ran into many people from the other side, right? From Asia, and they're almost like very disconnected with what's happening here, right? And we don't travel to Asia to some Climate Week to talk about all this stuff. And I bet there's probably organizations out there on that side that are doing similar work, right? So we would love to having this ability to explain what we're doing. We want these organizations to collaborate with us. We're like fully open to working with everybody, sharing data, sharing project.
How do you, when I did a previous life at startup in kind of data aggregation space and ended up building a genealogy application, and we were competing with Ancestry.com, and so many of the microeconomics around those data sets ended up boiling back down to the dynamics of network effects and proprietary silos in order to try to essentially command profit margins. And so as we're in this kind of shared space of ecological coordination, we want the projects to get the funds. We want to make it as easy as possible. We want the data to be as interoperable as we can. But also, there's still the entity of Explorer.land, right? And you have to kind of somehow make all of the math work to pay for your team and your operations and so forth. So, how do you think about the incentive structure at the base of your entity? How are you structured? How do you, capitalize?
It's a good question. So in the beginning, we were really thinking, shall we put it up as an NGO, a cooperative, or for profit business? No? And maybe a side note, I also studied social banking, social finance, where I really dive deeper into the, let's say, the nitty gritty of the capitalistic system. But at the end, we decided for a for-profit organization because it's more agile, so you can decide and be quicker. But we have a very specific view on, let's say, getting paid. So our goal is not to maximize the profit, if a client is paying for something, we know we have created a value for them.
Right.
And we see the payment from the client towards us as an appreciation for the work that then enables us to do it again and do it for more people. That's the one aspect. And we have some custom projects going on. So one organization wants a landscape module, the other one wants a dashboard. But we only do this if they open these features to the entire community, so that bigger organizations which want specific functions and they are in line with the other community, with the overall goals of the platform, we co-finance with these software development projects the entire platform. So these,
yeah. I've seen examples like that. A project that's a bit different, but they have a similar model, high-low, in terms of co-funding feature sets, but then making those available for everyone.
Yeah.
What about the base layer of the cap structure, if you don't mind me asking, the equity incentives? Do you have outside investors? Is it venture backed? How do you do that?
Basically, we started as a pure consulting company, like 2011, and then in 2018, when we launched Explorer the first time, it was a bootstrap thing. So we slowly evolved, and we had a decent, very decent investment like 2 years ago, where we doubled our staff, now being 20 people. But it's basically a bootstrap business, and
cool.
Yeah, we're profitable, decently profitable.
Oh, great. Yeah, so you're not like kind of blitz scaling to go get 100x, return to get bought out by Salesforce.
Maybe one word to this. So we're really mission driven. So one of my co-founders, he did a PhD in physics, so he could get a good job in the industry, but he dropped that and decided to start with us. And a vision of Explorer, if it really thrives and becomes the platform for this community, at some day, I'm recording it here now. We want to give it back to the community and potentially build out a cooperative of it, so that everyone who puts their project onto Explorer is a cooperative member. Because I don't like these models like Uber and Airbnb, where you create a kind of community, but then become a gatekeeper.
Right.
So, and maybe then OpenForests will work as a service company for the cooperative.
Right.
So something like that. But at some point, if it is all structured and worked out, we want to give it back to the community.
Nice.
This is what this whole model is what made me fall in love with the organization.
Yeah.
Because to me, it really touches with the core values, right?
Totally.
Like I was in sales. I can go back into sales.
Yeah.
If money is the thing, it's no problem, right? But when you work for an organization like this and you truly believe in impact, it means a lot to you. And what I love even more is the fact that my children look at me and they're looking at me like dad's in New York trying to help save humanity, right? And he's not in New York for a conference talking about
making money,
5G or making money, right? So, and just replicating that, like, and just, energizing that kind of culture within children.
Yeah.
I think it means so much, because I'm hoping that will create a ripple effect where she will talk to her, friends at school and so on, and create this like energy for like this youth to actually think differently, instead of like following this like structure of let's create monsters, right? Because it's about time we learn what have we done with this planet by creating these monsters. It's destruction, right? So,
yeah, and we don't really have a choice, right? Like for your children to have a planet to live on, we need to move in this direction and to do this work. And so yeah, I commend both of you for being at the leading edge of a lot of this efforts. Excited to be just collaborating and weaving with you guys, the whole team, all the different projects in this space.
Likewise.
Any thoughts? Any other reflections you want to share? The future of the platform. Other messages you want to leave in this format.
Well, for me, I think industry collaboration is key.
Mm.
We recently learned about Symbiosis Coalition from Julia Strong. I think that's amazing. She's trying to drive this coalition to bring everything together.
Mm.
We met with like someone that like I highly respect, Chris Armitage from Global Evergreening Alliance. I admire the work he's doing. Riet Butler, who's doing this amazing work, communicating what's happening on the ground. So I think there's going to be an amazing future for what we're doing, where we're gonna work with everybody, bring everything together,
Mm.
and get these messages across, and get every community that's working on something to actually show this, right? Engaging everybody. I think that's the path that we all need to take. We need to work together
Mm.
instead of working towards driving GDP, right? We need to just really come back to the planet and connect with nature and do what we have to do to save ourselves
Mm.
and what's around us. So
Mm.
yeah.
Well, so we started the conversation with the legal guardrails. We spoke about the technology and to enable, and also as a last point about the inspiration. And I think that's really what we try to do is
Mm.
bring the entire community to the surface, make it visible, and inspire, let's say, new hope and better future.
Mm. Alexander, Mange, thank you so much.
And thank you so
Likewise.
much, Matthew, for doing what you guys are doing,
Yeah.
and providing this visibility to the world. I think without that, we can't do what we do. So it's like an honor to be in New York, having this discussion with you.
Thank you. To learn more, go to Explorer.land. And for more great conversations like this one, including all of those that we're having here at New York Climate Week 2024, just go to maearth.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.